All right, guys, we're going to do a long unit review here. This was kind of big. It's the advancements in religion and philosophy that happened after the end of the River Valley civilizations. Between 800 and 300 BC, there are revolutions from Asia ending up in Europe that will transform the way the world works. And hopefully you can pick up the elite marching band there in the old background. Number one, these advancements in religion and philosophy have several things in common. Number one, they all begin in or near River Valley civilizations, which were among the most advanced in the world at the time. Number two, advancements or breakthroughs will stay within the original framework of the established religion, meaning you can add on to them, you can change them, but its roots are always going to be grounded. An example is Judaism, on top of which is Christianity, on top of which is then Islam. Eventually, number three, these ideas are going to spread globally through trade, through migration, trade along the Silk Road, migration of people from one area of the world to another, and even warfare will spread these ideas globally. And each was created to solve some type of crisis. The old ways of doing things broke down, and the new methods were needed to ensure that they worked. So, we're going to go, we ended with the Shang and Zhao Chao dynasty here in Egypt. We're now going to rewind and go to India, to Mesopotamia, and up into Europe. And in China, we have the concept of legalism. And legalism means legal terms, harsh punishments. And after the Zhao dynasty ended, there was a period of warring states throughout ancient China. Dissension, chaos. And at the end of this, a new dynasty will come to power that wants to restore order. And the way to restore order, the Qin thought, was to have uniform, even laws. It was brought up by a military guy who likes chain of command, general, colonel, major, captain, lieutenant. And that a strong country equals a uniformed country. Right? If we're all strong, we're all doing the same thing, rowing at the same time, we're going to be perfect. And he said we cannot look to the dynastic past for answers. What the Shang did, what the Zhao Chao did were great, but there are different features here now in the modern day. So those things simply just cannot help us. And he said that, or eventually, Emperor Shi Huangdi is going to put these ideas into place, that humans are driven by greed. Therefore, the only thing that can save them is swift, harsh punishments. All right? Quickly and brutally stamp out the problem. We're going to teach you what not to do. And he said that rich rewards would strengthen a state. If we punish you harshly for doing wrong and we reward you greatly, you are going to want to do the right thing. And these laws should be swift and they should be impartial. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, everybody is subject to them. And the guy that instituted this is the great Emperor Shi Huangdi. And one of the things he will do to make sure nobody questions him is he will burn all the books of opposing philosophies. He'll save just a few. That way nobody can question him. He jails and kills a lot of the intellectuals, and he lets a few go to tell everybody how mean and scary he actually is. A couple of good things that happened under Shi Huangdi is agriculture was increased. There was more land that could be farmed, and the Great Wall was joined together, the different sections to form the massive Great Wall. And he said that the people are going to write in a uniform manner, meaning that everybody is going to write the same way. You may speak different dialects, but you're going to write the same way. However, his high taxes and his ruling by the fist broke the civilization down, and the Qin dynasty is the shortest of the 31 dynasties in China. Here is a look at the Great Wall, where some of you have been. And the other great thing showing his strong central authority are the terracotta warriors. These thousands of statues that look just like his army to protect him in the afterlife. So, very interesting guy. Next up is the guy that I really like, Confucius. Now, Confucius wanted to be an advisor. He wanted to be a politician. The problem is he kept getting fired for telling the truth, right? His bosses wanted a yes man. Should we raise taxes in Chapel Hill? Well, Your Highness, no, I don't really think we should. They've had a couple. Shut up, Confucius. That's not what I want to hear. And so Confucius decided to become a teacher. If he couldn't be an advisor, he wanted his students to think and to ask these questions. Now, Confucius did not consider himself an innovator at all. He said, I am just a transmitter of tradition. And he didn't write anything down. His students did it for him in a group of works known as the Analects. And whenever China gets itself into trouble from this point on, they ask itself that question, what would Confucius do? He said what we need to do is look at the top of the Zhao and the Chao dynasty, the golden ages, and we need to do what those emperors did like you. You went out and dug those ditches. He worked hard. He was selfless. That's what we need to do. And he came up with the concept of filial piety. Filial piety, he said, would form an unbroken chain from the emperor down to the poorest peasant. It has dual responsibilities. You have a superior responsibility to teach and help, and you have an inferior responsibility to listen and learn. And he said that the word noble doesn't mean someone who is rich from birth, but rather noble, just good behavior, where you have to do the right thing, not the popular thing. Be a good role model. The basic person can't understand it, but they can be made to follow. They will follow a good example. So like when Caroline said, oh yeah, I would help the new student if I like them, and we all laughed. We know that's not what she meant, but to Confucius, he would say, no, Caroline, you've got to help everybody. You've grown up here, you know Chapel Hill, your job is to help them. So, he breaks things down into 5 relationships. Ruler to subject, older brother, father to son, older brother to younger brother, husband to wife, and friend to friend. And if the emperor starts off as the ultimate role model and everybody does their job, everybody has a role to play, right? Like UVA basketball or the San Antonio Spurs. We don't need to be a bunch of superstars, but we work well together. If we all do what we're supposed to do, nothing will be left undone. And it is Confucius that validates the dynastic cycle, where at the top of the golden age we have these strong emperors. They will establish peace. They will get rid of bandits. They will fix the irrigation canals and give land to the peasants. But after a while, all right, their great-great-grandson and their great-great-great-grandson, well, they don't have to do anything anymore. The whole hard work has been done. They just have to maintain it. And a little while after that, the great-great-great-grandson is a spoiled rich kid. He doesn't do anything, so he neglects his duties. There's corruption in the government. People are starving. Bandits in the provinces. And because he's not paying attention, he imposes heavy taxes to pay for his Xbox 7 and his iPhone X and his PlayStation 1, 2, 3, or 4. The gods get angry and they remove the viol, the mandate from him, and the dynasty is overthrown. There'll be rebellion, flood, chaos, and famine until somebody, normally a peasant, of the people, for the people, will kickstart the whole process all over again. Following Confucius is the most difficult one to comprehend, and that is Taoism, where Confucius said we all must do our job, listen and learn, teach and help, be a role player. Taoists believed in a thing known as the Tao, something you couldn't see, you couldn't touch, you couldn't smell. And what they said was that heaven and earth are cruel. They are ruthless. Everybody must be treated as a straw dog. A straw dog is that worthless creature that if it wasn't there, nobody would notice. And Taoists said you shouldn't seek to learn. You shouldn't seek knowledge because knowledge is bad. It creates distinction. You will know good or bad, rich or poor, old or young. And if we apply this to a political philosophy, the sage king will act without acting. You will learn without learning. And the idea behind that is if the people were struggling and the emperor went down there to help them, they would always depend on the government to bail them out. As hard as it is, you've got to let the people suffer and struggle and figure it out for themselves. It's the old adage, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and he will eat for a lifetime. You know, it's like, the helicopter parents who always jump in and do the project for the kid. No, sometimes you got to let them fail in order to succeed. So if the government always helped, people would never learn. It's a very difficult thing, but it kind of makes sense if you think about it. After leaving China, we are now going over to India, where for a long time there was the Vedic age, all right, when the Rig Veda was written, and the Brahmins, the priests that were in control, had this elaborate magical approach to worship, full of expensive rituals involving sacrifice. And this held the poor people down. They couldn't do those sacrifices for the simple fact they couldn't afford to. They needed their chickens and their goats to survive. They couldn't sacrifice them. And along comes a new Veda, right around 400 BC, where it says that believers in Hinduism can achieve Brahman through mental action alone. Now, Brahman is the unseen spiritual force that binds all living things together. It's something that you couldn't see, that you couldn't touch, that you couldn't smell, but it was always there. And they said the purpose of the ritual is not conducting the ritual, it was the intent of it. So they said you can achieve that through mental action alone. All right? If you focus on it, you can get there. The ritual is not important. The goal of the ritual is. And the Upanishads, one of the strains or sects of Islam, come up with this idea that there's three planes of existence. There's the earthly plane where we are now. Then there is the heavenly plane where the gods and goddesses live. And above that is Brahman. And so you are like climbing a ladder in order to get to Brahman. And climbing that ladder requires you to go through the transmigration or the samsara, the never-ending cycle of death and rebirth. You're going to live and be born many times climbing that ladder. And so what you can do is focus on yourself. If you don't like where you are in Hinduism, it's because of something you did in your previous life. There's nobody to blame but yourself. And understanding this is liberating yet burdensome. It's liberating because if your life is bad, you know that it will eventually end, but it's burdensome because you know you've got to be born again to climb that ladder. So here is a saying that we think of good karma and bad karma. Well, karma simply means work. It's what you do. So in order to climb the ladder, you want to maximize your good actions and you want to minimize your bad ones. All right, you want to be lighter. Dharma is the idea in this process that it is the rule book. It is the social and political and religious rules of Hinduism. It says that you have to obey the laws of your caste and your gender and your occupation. If you don't like where you are, it's simply because of what you did. You can't shortcut it. You can't jump in front of the train to get to the next round of rebirth, because that's cheating. Life is hard. You've got to suffer. You've got to obey the rules. And the Jainist sect of Hinduism comes up with the idea your soul or your Atman and your karma, actions attach themselves to your soul. Your good actions don't weigh very much. Think of Osiris weighing your heart on the scale with the feather. Bad actions add like magnetic weight to your soul, and they anchor you and pull you down. I think of Jacob Marley coming to see Ebenezer Scrooge, all right? Scrooge, I formed these chains when I was alive. Don't wind up like me. Hinduism, because there are many different sects and they want to visualize what's going on, they have different visions of the many polytheistic gods and goddesses. But even the gods and goddesses are subject to Brahman. We have to understand that the best most of us can do is to be born as a god or a goddess. Very select few make it all the way to Brahman. Stemming off of Hinduism will be Buddhism, one of the great universalist forms of faith in the world. And Buddhism is attractive because it is adaptive. It kind of morphs to other religions in the area. And in Buddhism, we have the larger-than-life figure Siddhartha Gautama, who is a rich guy, until he turns about 30 years old, and he goes out and he sees a rich man, a sick man, a poor man, and a dying man. And it freaks him out. So he leaves his life of privilege and he goes wandering, and after 40 days he's underneath a pipal tree, and blam! All of his previous lives are revealed to him. He knows what he did right, and he knows what he did wrong. And when he awakens, he becomes the Buddha, or the enlightened one. And he comes up with a concept of getting to nirvana. Nirvana to a Buddhist is the same thing to Brahman to a Hindu. And Buddha says, in order to escape from the transmigration, you've got to understand the four noble truths. Number one, that all life is suffering. Life is hard. Life is a grind. It is a constant test. I think it was Anna who said, oh my gosh, this would require you, it would be so stressful. You got to think about every single thing that you do. And that's true. Second noble truth is that life is hard because of desire, of greed. We're never satisfied. We always want more and more and more. So if we end number 3, our desire, we will end our suffering. The way to do that is number 4 is to follow the Eightfold Path. Practice right understanding, right speech, right thought. Don't think bad thoughts about others. Don't say mean things about others. Do the right thing, not the popular thing. All right? Live right. Don't live too extravagantly. Put in the right amount of effort. Don't work too hard, but don't work too little. And focus on where you are. If we do those things, then you're going to wind up being okay. This will be a shortcut to nirvana. Buddha creates what I call the everyman's way of getting to nirvana. It won't take you several lifetimes. If you really focus on it, you can take a shortcut and go right to it. Or instead of taking many lives, it may only take 2 or 3. And a lot of the poor people loved it in Hinduism as it freed them from the caste system. And so, Know the truth. Say nothing to hurt others. Control your bad thoughts. Resist evil. Work for the good of others. Respect all life. If you look at all of these religions, the tenet or the core principle is sometimes nearly the same. Next up, we're going back to Mesopotamia, and we are getting a new religion in the form of Judaism. All right, the religion of the Israelites. And the Israelites are going to be different because they're going to come up with a policy or the idea of God. One single monotheistic God. We don't need a God of the wind and a God of the rain and the God of the sun, because we have one guy who does it all. And they believe in a covenant, which is an old school contract that God formed with the founder of the nation, Abraham. All right, God said, if you believe in me and worship me, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sands on the seashore. But you got to listen to me. This is a binding contract. It's a two-way street. And so we learn of this through the Old Testament, which is a historical narrative of the Hebrew people. And there's Hittites are mentioned, and Assyrians, and Babylonians, and Akkadians. They're all mentioned in the Hebrew Bible because they wrote about the same event from different perspectives. But just like in the Dynastic Cycle, it's okay when Abraham's alive, but years and years go by and people forget, well, what did Abraham do? All right, what did Abraham do again? Right? We don't remember. What's this covenant thing? So God will send back an inspired messenger known as a prophet. And this prophet will lead people back. All right? Big time prophets are Moses. All right? King David, the warrior king who slew Goliath. These are important people in the religion. And Moses is one of these big timers, leading the Hebrews from Egypt. Moses, like Buddha, will go do his 40 days out in the desert. And then when he leads the people out of Egypt after he's shaped and molded, God will give him a rule book. This is exactly what I need you guys to do so you don't forget. Here is the Torah and the 10 Commandments. This is all you have to do. I'm going to make it easy for you. And here's where we get the idea that the people begin. It's an important moment in world history. They believe they are God's chosen people. It's an exciting moment. And here we get two centerpieces of Judaic monotheism. Is number one, God has a divine plan. He knows what you're going to do before you do it. Secondly, God is perfect justice and goodness. All right? When you screw up, He has to punish you. But He's not punishing you to be mean. He's doing it to teach you what not to do. Please don't do that. I need you to listen and do this. I made it easy for you. And the great thing about perfect, justice and goodness is God will always take you back. All you have to do is say, I'm sorry. Here's Moses, getting the 10 Commandments. Here's the famous temple that will be built by King Solomon. And Israel becomes a nation not defined by a long-lasting dynasty. They are not remembered for their place or for a language, but developing a long-lasting faith and their practice of it. Something new that we had not seen before. And so in last place, now we get Greek thought. Right? We're leaving religion, we're going back to political philosophy. And the Greeks, and Thales here, was sitting by a stream one day, and he sees some rocks and settlement build up, and the course of the stream changes ever so slightly. He's like, wait a minute, that wasn't Poseidon. That wasn't some river nymph, all right? I saw that happen. So the world must therefore be rational and knowable. And if we can apply those laws to nature, then we can apply them to politics as well. And so here we get the big three philosophers. Socrates is the first one. Very similar to Confucius, He starts out wanting to be a politician, but he becomes a teacher instead. Also, like Confucius, he doesn't write things down. His students do. He says, guys, I'm not creating anything. I'm just a transmitter of tradition. But before that, Socrates helps write the laws of Athens. And Socrates did not like democracy because he felt most people weren't smart enough to make decisions for everybody else. But he felt that if you chose to live in a country, if you choose to live there, then you should obey its laws. You should want to take part in it. And so he taught his students to question their leaders, to get at their core. He said, people can tell you what they're doing, but they can't tell you why they're doing it. So a politician will say, I'm going to fix immigration, I'm going to reform health care, I'm going to help education, I'm going to get America back to work. And Socrates would say, well, how are you going to do that? Give me specifics. Give me, what we watched today in class, evidence. Give me a timeline. How much money is that going to cost? What are the benchmarks so we know you're following through on it? And when guys were like, they couldn't answer it, Socrates got frustrated, and the people hated it. And so when they were questioned with what is these called the Socratic method, they sentenced Socrates to death. He could choose to be executed or be kicked out of the city. He knows that ostracism is not one of the laws that he wrote, so he chooses death. And the great statesman Socrates' death will cause number 2, our good man Plato here, to go wandering for 10 years. Plato is Socrates' best student. And he wanders for 10 years searching for the perfect government. And as he's doing this, he writes 26 different essays. Allegory in the Cave, the reaching and thirsting for education is one, and Plato's Republic is the other one. And he believes he found the perfect government in the city of Atlantis, where they have the most beautiful republic in his mind, having 3 separate classes. There are philosopher kings who would rather think and study, but they understand, like good Confucians, that they have to be the role models for everybody else. They've got to tell everybody else what to do. Second class are warriors to keep people safe. And in third place are farmers. And what these farmers say, what Socrates says, is you should subordinate yourself to the will of your community. If you want to be a doctor and your community needs you to be a garbage collector, well then you have to be a garbage collector. You are like a Lego piece. They will put you into place. All right? Subordinate yourself to the will of the community. He said human logic is more important than God's. The gods don't really do anything. Zeus, Athena, whatever. It's humans who control things. And Plato's best student was a guy named Aristotle. And Aristotle disagrees with his teacher. And he says, hey, you can understand anything by watching it long enough. A tiger can't change his stripes. Sooner or later, you will reveal who you are. You can give a presentation in front of a group of people and act one way, but it's behind closed doors when you will really show who you are. And Aristotle said the problem with most governments is they haven't separated their religion from their government. He said those two things should never, ever intertwine. Government should never tell people what to believe. And he's a little bit different than Taoist, where he says the government's job should teach people to be self-sufficient. Not to let them struggle, but to help them, show them. Once I've shown you, once I've taught you how to do it, now you're on your own. And the government's job is to help people to climb the social ladder. Don't lock you in the caste system or in Plato's caste system, But if you want to better yourself, if you've got a goal to become educated or to get a different job, the government should help you. Because if everybody is working, striving towards that goal, we'll achieve the best for the majority. You're never going to make everybody happy, and there's always going to be slackers. But if the government is helping most people move along, it's going to go extremely well. The other thing Aristotle said is aim for moderation in all things. He said, he who wants to win an election should target the middle class. He said, he who controls the middle class will never ever lose because they are the majority of the population. All right, guys, that's a quick review. I hope you enjoyed it. Please watch it, and I will see you guys shortly.